Hello, supporting listeners. Thank you so much for your continued support of the Reforming Men podcast. I want to begin by just apologizing for not having this content to you sooner this year. As this is being released, it's now October of 2025, and Matt and I were hoping to have this kind of content released to you in June or July. Now, sadly, I had several things happen to me this summer that prohibited this from being released to you earlier. First, my father-in-law passed away in June, and so it seemed like every time Matt and I would set to record an episode, that there would something would come up, and I would have to either leave town or I had to spend a couple weeks with my family just in his home with him as he passed away. And then we had General Assembly, and then there was just more things going on from there as Leslie and I inherited a family business from my father-in-law, and so she had to basically jump through a bunch of hoops in order to legally take possession of that business. And then in August, we had a fourth child. And so it was a wild summer. It was a wild summer for us as a family. And in the midst of all of that, Matt was on sabbatical. And so there would be a few days here and there in which I was able to record, but he was busy doing some other things that were pertinent to finishing his book and being on his sabbatical. So I apologize for not getting this content to you guys sooner. We are so thankful for your continued support of our podcast in both the audio and video format. And I hope you'll enjoy these episodes that we have for you. We have two that are being released right now, and then we hope next month to release a couple of more 30 to 40 minute bonus episodes. We're always aiming for 30 minutes for these bonus episodes, but we're both preachers, and so usually they go more like 40 to 45 minutes. But having said all of that, thank you again for your support, and I hope you enjoy this bonus content that Matt and I have put together for you. Blessings. Well, hello, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Reforming Men podcast. I'm Nate Zanders, and my co-host is Matt Adams. And today we're going to talk about the Billy Graham rule. Matt, for those who might not know what the Billy Graham rule is, how would you describe it to someone who has no idea what we're talking about?
Well, I think, we can simplify it to just simply say that at no time Billy Graham set this rule for himself and his ministry that he was never alone with a member of the opposite sex. And so that's a very simplified version, I do believe, but I think that's a good building spot for us to work on because as men, we have to be very particular about the temptation that we have, and also the way in which we engage the opposite sex, and the ways in which we are viewed as men, and especially as leaders in Christ Church, as ministers. But the Billy Graham rule actually is applicable to all spheres of life, and we'll get into all that as we begin to talk about these things. But Nate, I'll kick the question back over to you. I know I gave a very simplified version, but how would you define the Billy Graham rule?
No, I don't really have anything to add to that. It's particularly important, I think, for men in positions of power and authority. And I think one of the great misunderstandings of the Billy Graham rule is that it's just about the man. And that's why I think for so many years in Christian circles, seminaries, churches, denominations, etc., that the Billy Graham rule fell on hard times, because it's actually not just about protecting the reputation of the man, but actually protecting the reputation of Christ and his church, and also the woman that we would be meeting with, right? We live in a very hypersexualized world. Female-initiated affairs have been rising over the last 20 years because adultery is not just a male problem. It's actually what someone described as a crime of opportunity, right? So as more women have entered the workplace, and as more women have climbed the corporate ladder and been, traveling out and about, what's happened is that more women are stepping out on their marriages as well. And so it's not just about the man, and it's not intended to make anybody feel bad or to slight anyone's character. It's also about the public witness of the church. If someone were to drive by my church and see my car and the car of another woman, from the community, and there's no other cars in the parking lot, or if someone were to see me meeting alone with another woman, it might be completely harmless and benign. But we have a duty to be above reproach, to protect the reputation of the bride of Christ. My reputation I need to protect, and I need to protect the reputation of the congregant that I'm talking with. So it's really not just about me or you. It's about the honor and integrity of everybody involved from top to bottom.
Yeah. And, one of the things that you mentioned that I really appreciated was the fact that the Billy Graham rule has fallen on hard times, that it seems a little antiquated. It's outdated for our current ministry practices, or even because of the rise of women in something like the workplace. It's not suitable for the day and age in which we now find ourselves in. I was actually on the Mission to the World COC, and this is a little bit of insider baseball for the PCA world. But I was on the MTW COC a number of years ago, where they were actually trying to take the Billy Graham rule out of the policy manual for our MTW missionaries. And I was the first person to kind of raise my hand and ask our director, our coordinator, why was this so? And he began to explain all of these reasons why the permanent committee of the MTW had decided to remove these stipulations and these guidelines to follow. And of course, we were acknowledging and questioning their understanding of not only male and female relationships, but also the witness of Christ Church, and the duty that the missionary has to protect their reputation, to protect a member of the flock that Christ has made them overseers of. And so all these things are pertaining to our discussion, right? This idea of the Imago Dei, this idea of male and female relationships, this idea of protecting not only ourselves, but also protecting those who we have authority over. And immediately, I think our listeners will begin to hesitate a little bit and push back on this idea of authority. Authority is so trampled against in this postmodern age. So when we say authoritative positions, are we using, the Westminster Larger Catechism, this idea of superiors and inferiors? How are we defining, Nate, authoritative roles, particularly for ministers and elders of Christ Church, but also in places like Fortune 500 company?
Yeah, it can be multifaceted. There's ecclesial authority, in which, as the Book of Church Order reminds us, our authority is ministerial and declarative. So we don't have any sort of civil authority. It's a spiritual authority. But in the workplace, in a Fortune 500 company, as you refer to it, or even in a small business, there is different and varying forms of authority that that people are under. There's also just kind of relational authority that that we have with various people in our lives, and we can't get away from authority and the role that it plays in society. There's always going to be authority in every realm and sphere that we're in. And if you're in a position of authority, and to be clear, authority and power are two different things, right? So someone could be in a position of authority and not have a whole bunch of power, and someone could have a whole bunch of power but really have no position of authority. And both of those things, apart from one another and then also combined, can be used for great good and also great evil. And so in the context of the Billy Graham rule, we have to, there's a certain way, according to the Westminster Larger Catechism, that we as superiors, in our context as teaching elders, there's a certain way that we have to conduct ourselves and operate towards our inferiors. And that language makes people squeamish, superior, inferior. It's a very archaic way of saying people in authority and people under authority, right? We're not saying that that they're lesser than us, or they're not as, they're lesser image bearers than we are. That's not what we're saying. It's just discussing, authority structures. And so there's a certain responsibility we have to them to care for them and to protect them. And that means including protecting their reputation, which is just a duty that we have to all men according to the ninth commandment. So we've got the ninth commandment and the fifth commandment heavily playing roles here in the Billy Graham rule. And as one teaching elder's wife recently said about the slippery slope fallacy, she said, the slippery slopists are constantly being vindicated. And I think when it comes to the Billy Graham rule, the people who advocate for the Billy Graham rule are constantly being vindicated.
Right. Yeah.
Where did you go to seminary, Matt? You went to RTS, right?
No, doing my D-Min at RTS right now, but I went to Erskine Theological Seminary.
Did you really? I
Yep.
realized that.
Yeah.
Well, that might actually give us something a little bit more to talk about, because I know Erskine's not quite as conservative as like Greenville or RTS Jackson or whatever.
Yep.
How is the Billy Graham rule either directly by name or implicitly spoken of at Erskine?
Well, our counseling professor was actually very good at explicitly teaching us the Billy Graham rule, as
That's great.
as those who are training for ministry. Erskine is a unique place to study because at the time I was going strictly at the Columbia, South Carolina campus, and on the heels of my enrollment, the state bishop of the AME, the Anglican or the African Methodist Episcopal denomination, had just put in some guidelines that all of their ministers had to be theologically educated. And so because we offered evening classes, because we were centrally located in the state of South Carolina, a lot of those AME students came to Erskine for study, and that meant that we were in a class with many AME female pastors. But he did not shy away from making sure that we realized that there are grave consequences to not following this rule, but in all actuality, in promoting the rule, showing the safeguards of the rule being put in place in a ministry context. I remember him specifically mentioning, for us men who were training for the ministry, one of the things that we were going to have before us is ladies who are struggling at home in their marriages, wanting to come and be counseled. And of course, we know that women are usually more open to having those conversations. But you think about a counseling setting. You're sitting down with a woman who is disgruntled with her husband. They never listen to her. They never pray with her. They don't lead her well. She feels neglected. All of these things are coming into play. I don't think my husband is taking his spiritual walk with Christ serious enough. And then all of a sudden you have a pastor sitting there working as a shepherd, doing his duties as a shepherd, and he's praying with her, he's leading her, he is exemplifying a walk in a heart for Christ and with Christ. He is demonstrating all those things that she wants her husband to portray.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the disgruntledness, the dissatisfaction begins to lead itself into a situation where, well, the pastor's everything I want my husband to be.
Yeah.
So we start desiring or admiring that pastor, and then that relationship, like a slippery slope, becomes more intimate, and then we find ourselves, as we know throughout even recent history, those relationships between the shepherd and the sheep becomes emotional, and then often becomes physical as well. He would say repeatedly, if you're praying with a member of the opposite sex on any sort of regular basis, please know that there is nothing more intimate than praying together one-on-one, and it will usually lead to some sort of affair, emotional or physical, or both. And so he was very, very diligent in helping us prepare ourselves for situations like that. Was it the same for you at RTS?
Well, I'm at RTS right now in Charlotte for a counseling degree, but I got
That's
my
right.
MDiv at Covenant. And so, but I'm going to come to that in a minute. But something you just said. So when I was in campus outreach as a student at Tennessee Tech, there was this young couple. They were seniors, I think, and they said, "Hey, we're going to meet. Hey, the two of us are going to meet once a week, and we're just going to pray together to see if it's God's will for us to be married." And the campus minister or the campus director, they don't have campus ministers, they're campus directors. He, even at 25, 26, had the wisdom to say, if you guys are going to meet together once a week this whole semester and pray together about whether or not you should be married, you're going to end up married. And he just kind of helped them understand the very intimate thing that they were agreeing to do, and kind of said, hey, maybe that what you should do is you should meet with somebody like your dorm mate or somebody that you know in campus outreach and pray with them about whether or not it's God's will for the two of you to be married, or if this is a good match to safeguard your hearts and minds here. And so it's the same thing. It's what we don't often think about when Paul tells us to wash our wives with the word and to spiritually lead them. He's actually also giving us the opportunity to build all kinds of intimacy with our wives.
Mm-hmm. It's
not just this cold responsibility box to check. He actually desires that we would have this closeness. And I got to be careful not to chase rabbit trails here, because this actually gives me lots of different thoughts that all kind of pertain to this topic. But at Covenant, my experience was, because I was a hardcore Billy Graham guy going in, not so much when I came out, and then just life and experience taught me, basically re-educated me. So there's heavily integrated counseling program at Covenant, a lot of female MDiv students in our classrooms. And it was never, the Billy Graham rule, I want to be careful here, it was never openly mocked, but it was definitely looked down upon because, well, women need pastors too. And women shouldn't have to be made to feel like there's some sort of adulteress in waiting, or there's some sort of danger to you. You don't want to make women feel like you're afraid of them, like at any given moment you could ruin their ministry. And again, I think that's just a fundamental misunderstanding of the Billy Graham rule. And I wish it had the wisdom at age 25, 26 to say, actually, this is also about their integrity and their reputation. This isn't about, this isn't about just about me. And, time and time again, how many times have we seen it in the PCA in the last 10 years, Matt, where some guy who's on the more progressive, not that the progressive guys in the PCA are the only ones that can screw up and ruin their marriages and their ministries. But we've seen it time and time again that guys breaking this rule in the PCA end up out of the ministry and maybe even out of their marriages.
Yep.
And it doesn't always start nefariously. Like what you were describing earlier actually happened to a guy that I know. He was just being a good pastor to a female staff member in the church. And he didn't think anything of it. They weren't meeting one-on-one. They were just having a conversation out there kind of on an ongoing basis, just in front of other people, even just he's giving them pastoral wisdom and biblical truth and praying with them. And she caught feels. He didn't. He wasn't, doing anything evil or wicked. He wasn't plotting anything. But it just happened because he was just trying to be a good pastor. But what he ended up doing was giving her all the things that she wanted her husband to be giving her.
Yeah.
And that caused a problem in the church, and that caused disruption in the church. So the Billy Graham rule, again, it's not just about this guy and this woman. It's also about the peace and purity of the whole church, because the whole church had to feel the impact, because there's all this confusion. It's like, well, wait a minute. Was there an actual affair? Like, what's going on here? He's like taking a leave of absence. Like, you're saying nothing actually happened. So why is he taking a leave of absence? There's a lot of confusion. And there's a lot of hurt that can be avoided by this. But Matt, let's kind of connect the dots here between the Billy Graham rule and also this thing that's happening. I don't know if you're aware of this whole issue of elderesses and shepherdesses and deaconesses in the church, kind of de facto female officers. People will say, well, this is exactly why we need female officers in the church.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
help us dispel the myth that the Billy Graham rule then requires us to figure out how to somehow have female officers in the church.
Yeah. I actually remember a teaching elder in the PCA who was quite prominent a number of years ago, putting a tweet or a post, I don't know what they call them anymore, on X, on Twitter, saying that we needed female judges on the Standing Judicial Commission for this very reason, to handle sensitive topics where women have been wronged or something along those lines. And so this is definitely a mindset in the PCA that has caught some traction in the last 5 or 6 years. Why do we not need this? Well, I think why we don't need this is because the scripture actually gives a relationship in Titus chapter 2 for women to disciple women, to train up women, especially older women and younger women, without any sort of title. It's just organically created within the life, within the family of the church.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think we're dealing with this idea of deaconesses and shepherdesses, and even crazy ideas about having women serving as judges on our judicial commission, is that we need a title to do any work for the Lord within the
Yeah.
local church.
Yeah.
And that's just not the case. I actually think I can make an argument that just being a member of Christ Church is the most important title that we have as Christians belonging to the household of faith. And so, while it seems like, especially in this, in this culture where feminism seems to rule the day, even if we're not saying feminism outrightly, there's undertones of feminism definitely come into play in all of these, in all these LGBTQ ideologies and the Me Too movement. All these things have flavors of feminism that are definitely need to be drawn out. But it seems to be that in the PCA world, to have any sort of functioning responsibility within the local church, being a member is not good enough. You have to have some
Right.
sort of position that, while they might say there's no authority in it, that carries some sort of title that is authoritative.
Yeah.
And so, one of the immediate pushbacks is something that you've said, that men only see women as some sort of sex idol, that we are so sexually driven as men that we can't shepherd women who are in our flock well. That was actually one of the things that was said in the MTW COC meeting a number of years ago, that we need to stop looking at women in a sexual deviant way. And, well, not only do we recognize the own temptations of our flesh, but also we realize at the same time that, just like your example, men can be totally oblivious to the feelings that the woman has towards her pastor or towards her elder.
Yeah.
And so there's
and women, it's
so many
shocking to
layers
say,
there.
and I can't believe that I even have to ever defend this, because it's not an indictment against the character of women. It's just a fact. A lot of women are attracted to men with power and or authority.
Right. Yep. And
It's
women,
it,
they're not analytical thinkers by nature either. They're more driven by their emotions, and that's not saying anything negative about them. That's just the way in which they have been created. And so their feelings often rule the day. And so if they have feelings, if they catch the feelings for someone in authority over them, the rash decision often leads to them pursuing those feelings. And one of the things that I think that we probably need to scratch at, and I'm like you, I have so many thoughts on this subject that we can't get into all the weeds of each and everything. But I think there's really two things that are at play here. One, and this is something that you brought up, what if the relationship is all emotional and it's not physical? Why would quote unquote emotional affair disrupt the peace and purity of the church? Why can that ruin marriages and families? But also just some very practical ideas, and I know we'll get here, but some very practical ideas on helps on how we as ministers counsel women, or how business leaders can function in an office space where they employee women, or any sort of thing. But Nate, let me kick that off to you. Maybe you have something to add about the shepherdess deaconess thing, and that would be great for our listeners as well. But why are we fighting against these ideas of a highly emotional relationship with a member of the opposite sex as well?
I'm going to address that shepherdess kind of idea first. I think, Titus 2 makes it clear, I think implicitly clear to me, that there is kind of an informal and relational authority that an older woman has. I think it was Thomas Watson in his commentary on the Ten Commandments that kind of draws out the fact that some people are fathers and mothers just by maturity and age and wisdom.
Yeah.
And so what we've seen in our church, which I think the women overall have a pretty good understanding of this, is that there are older women that are able to speak into the lives of younger women and be heard, and that's able to be received. And so the way that this has practically functioned in our church is that there's actually a deacon's wife that's she's nearly 70, who has been in a Titus 2 sense, a real blessing to a handful of women in the church that are just really struggling at times with they've got challenges in their parenting that most other women don't have. They've just got different stuff going on in the home and God's providence. And this deacon's wife has just been a real godsend to these women. And she's done this without needing a title, without us needing to put hands on her or commission her to do this. She's just being the body of Christ.
Yep.
Right. She's just seeing a need and meeting that need. And, there's been times where if me and another elder, we have an elder that's roughly the same age as my dad. And so there's been times where we've had to give shepherding and counsel to a woman, and his wife or my wife will tag along. There are helpmeets.
Mm-hmm.
And this older elder, his wife has a lot of, I hate to use the word clout, but a lot of clout, a lot of, I'm at a loss for the word I'm looking for, but she's just got a lot of credibility. There it is. She's got a lot of credibility.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of respect from the younger women in the church. And so she's able to be there, and just, again, in a Titus 2 way, she's able to speak into the life of this woman or that woman, and give them love and care and some feminine wisdom. And again, she doesn't need the title of elder to the women or eldress to the women, right? She just is being a helpmeet to an elder, and is being part of the body of Christ. We've had women in our homes. There's time where we've had different women in different just tough situations where they don't have a husband that they can turn to, and so they'll come and sit in our home, and my wife and I will send the kids outside to run around, and we'll make them some coffee, and the three of us will sit around and chat. That's my wife being my helpmeet, and just also being a loving part of the body of Christ. And so there are ways to handle these situations and these circumstances without us inventing offices. The BCO makes it clear that we can appoint diaconal assistants, both male and female. They're not ordained, and they're established by the session to serve alongside the deacons in their various functions and capacities. And so we have a mechanism if we wanted to give somebody a formal title without ordaining them. We have ways to do this. And so I think there's ways to meet the needs of women in the congregation. And I've made it very clear to my congregation. I said, there's other than my wife, there are two women in the congregation that I I will meet with privately for hours on end. One of them is my sister, and one of them is my mother. And if you don't like those exceptions, I don't know what to tell you.
Yep. Yep.
And then, there was one situation where an older woman in the church, about 65 years old at the time, she's the same age as my mother, said, "Hey, I just need your thoughts for like 10 minutes. Well, it was a Sunday after the service was over, and we sat down with a door open in the room right next to my office with, dozens of people are going by this door all the time. And she just asked me a question and asked for my thoughts. And in 10 minutes or less, the conversation was over.
Yep.
And there's been times where after I get done preaching, a woman will pull me aside and say, "I'd love to get your thoughts." And sometimes it does require me to set an appointment with them where my wife can be there, or, there are ways to minister, because women do need pastors.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yep.
And I want to pastor women in the church in the way that does not undermine the peace and purity of the church, and in a way that doesn't undermine the husband in the home.
Right.
And one of the ways that that's done, and we'll talk about this in another bonus episode maybe, one of the ways that's done is through women's midweek Bible studies. And many churches in the PCA and other so-called conservative denominations have like a female theologian in residence, or a female director of women's ministries, and she becomes the spiritual authority, opening God's word and dividing it for them on a weekly basis.
Yep.
And what that does is it means this woman now has a woman she can go to every week with all of her questions about what's going on in the Bible, and that person can answer her questions. When the Bible tells us, ladies, if you got a question, go ask your husband at home.
Yep.
So that's robbing men of the opportunity to wash their wives with the word. It's robbing men of the opportunity to build that spiritual and emotional intimacy with their wife as they're sitting there during family worship or afterwards and just reading their Bibles and talking about it. So
yeah.
I want to minister to women in the church without cutting their husbands off at the knees, and without hurting the peace and purity of the church.
Yeah, it is the Billy Graham rule is a respectful rule.
Yeah.
We're respecting the member of the opposite sex. We're respecting the role of the husband at home. We're respecting the church and the purity and the reputation of it. And so, the people who push back on it, I have a lot of questions regarding why they
I think they mean well. I think they mean well. But it's just foolishness.
And it is looked at, as you said, it's looked at as a fundamental rule. Especially in the era of why can't we be friends kind of thing. But, one, let me just bounce off this. One, I think that they, some of these churches that have the deaconesses and shepherdesses, they don't utilize the title that the BCO allows in the assistant to the diaconate, simply because it does not carry the authority that they want to show forth within the church. It's like an assistant to the assistant almost,
Right.
The office kind of thing. And so they want to give that lady a little more clout within the life of the church. And so they'll say very clearly, this is not an authoritative role. This is something that's up underneath the session, that's governed by the session, overseen by the session. But in the ways in which they title them, they're communicating authority.
Yeah. And it's not just the title, it's also the way they're actually functioning.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
They're in on the session. Some of them are in on the session meetings. They're directly helping the session to change course on different things. We heard of one case recently that the session was going to carry out a form of discipline in one way, and then the women's shepherding team said, "Nope, that's not heavy-handed enough. Like, you need to be a little stronger in the paint here." Which means either you got a bunch of nice guys that really don't understand the Christian ethics of the larger catechism, and a bunch of women had to tell them what was right and act like a group of Deborahs, and that's sad. Or they were onto something, and then a bunch of mean girls made them feel bad about the direction they were going, and they caved. Yeah. And so I don't know which one of those situations it is. Neither one are good for the church. Neither one are good for the church.
So practically, Nate, we do a lot of the same things that you are doing at your church. If if I am meeting with a lady within the church, usually my wife is tagging along with me. That seems to be the best means of accountability, not only for me, but also out of respect for the lady that I'm counseling, the lady that I'm shepherding. If that is just totally, totally not possible at the time, say you're sitting in the office and a lady shows up, and needs to talk. That happens a lot in small town South Carolina. Something real pressing happened that morning. I'm going to go talk to the pastor. Again, as you said, I want to be a good pastor to that lady. And so how am I going to manage meeting with her if just waiting for my wife to finish teaching at our Christian school and meeting later on in the afternoon? How am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to move to a public place. I'm going to move away from my office. I'm going to move into a parlor or a Sunday school room where my administrative assistant, my assistant pastor, other staff members are walking by. I'm going to leave that door open. And here's where I think people will push back to. What if that lady just refuses to do that? What if they go, I don't want your wife knowing all my business. I don't want to be in a public place where people are maybe overhearing as they walk by, even though, a church staff is trustworthy and not going to go blab around town who was in the office and why they were in the office and these things. What if they just simply refuse? What is our response to be?
Yeah, my response would be to say, hey, I can understand that. And I would respond by saying, I'm willing to meet with you if my wife is there. And if I'm in a situation where I could say, if you're not willing to meet with my wife, my mother is a member of our church, and she does have experience in certain areas of lay counseling, and she's also a deacon's wife. And I can tell you that both my wife and my mother are like Fort Knox with information. Particularly, my mom is, has a much longer track record with me than my wife does. Obviously, I've known my mom for 40 years now, and I've known my wife for 11. And I can tell you my mom is steel trap. So, I would just say I'm willing to meet with you if one of them are present. We can do it in my mother's home. We can do it in my home. We can come to your home. And I would, even if that wasn't good enough, say, hey, is there a woman in the church that you feel close to or comfortable with? Another elder's wife, or another deacon's wife, because we can kind of team workshop this. We can figure it out. And I would just explain. I would say, look, this is for the good of the church. It's for my good. It's for your good, and this is just what we do.
Yeah.
I try to set that expectation in new members class.
Yeah.
So that's understood. It's like, hey,
we do too. Yep.
It's like, hey, this is not a bait and switch. Like, you didn't become a member, and then 2 years later, I was like, surprise, this is how we do things here.
Nope. We talk about the Billy Graham rule in officer training. Yeah. We talk about it in our new members class by name explicitly. Yeah. We talk about the Billy Graham rule. And that is, I think you're pulling at a very important thread here. Is, it doesn't necessarily have to be our wives or even our mothers. My mother is a member of my church as well. And she is Fort Knox Jr., I'm sure. But, we can utilize other officers' wives. We can utilize, I would utilize my admin assistant.
Sure.
If that's what's needed for that lady to meet comfortably. She's not a member of our church, but she's an older, wise lady, good Christian, godly lady. And so she might not even speak. And
right.
Probably, preferably so. But she's going to be with us. Just so that we can respect one another, respect the dynamics of man and woman. And and we can tackle the issue as well. You know, we've been talking a lot about ministry, but let's think about, you know, that employer, right, that has the female employees. I mean, very basic, you know, very basic guidelines, helps would be, you know, don't travel alone with just you and her. You know, if it's, you know, don't have, you know, after business hour meetings with, you know, one-on-one with a female employee. A lot of these principles that we're establishing for, you know, for life in a church office or life in ministry can be carried over as well. But you know, that's one of the things that I think that employers that have female employees struggle with probably the most. You know, I'm a lawyer, and my paralegal is a female.
Yep.
Very common relationship. We have a continuing education seminar, you know, in Kansas somewhere, and so we're gonna ride in the car together. We're going to get on a plane together, and I know planes are public, but then we're going to go stay at the same hotel. We're going to eat dinner together. We're going to grab drinks after dinner together, and all of a sudden, you know, it's that slippery slope mentality that these work trips become, you know, quote unquote, work husbands and work wives, and then we find ourselves in emotional or maybe even physical affairs, and they ruin not only your Christian witness, but also marriages, trust between marriages as well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, the pushback that we get from the other side on this is, you know, you're treating women like they're something to be afraid of. And my response to that is, no, brother, it's actually you that's afraid of women because you're not willing to tell women something they don't want to hear.
Yep.
You're not willing to tell women in your church, here's the boundaries, here's the rules here. It's for the good of the whole church, because you're afraid of what they'll say and what they'll think. And you're not willing to look at women in the church and say, we want you to do the work of the saints, the work of the church without an official title.
Yep.
And because you're afraid of how that'll make them feel. You're afraid of the feelings of women. And you know, to me, if you're gripped by a constant fear of what women in your church feel and think about you, pastoral ministry is probably not for you.
Yeah.
I
agree.
We'll leave it there.
Yeah. You know, how many times have we heard at General Assembly, men, your wives and your daughters are watching. The ladies in your the ladies in your church are watching. I've always wanted to stand up after that kind of comment, Nate, and get to a microphone really quickly and go, my wife's actually in the back. She's not even having to watch the live stream, and she's against everything y'all are saying when you say
that's
that.
Right. Yeah, the women in my church are booing you right now from behind their computer screens if they're watching.
Exactly. So, well, I think we've scratched at the surface, Nate, of the Billy Graham rule, how to apply it in the life of men, especially men in authority. And newsflash, men, the way in which God has established creation, simply because you are a man, you are called to lead. You have a responsibility to execute authority in the civic sphere, in the home, in the church. And so we need to be very careful on how we minister to, how we interact, how we develop relationships with members of the opposite sex. And the Billy Graham rule is just a no-nonsense, very, it's so common sense at the same time to help us guard one another and respect how the Lord has created His universe. So, again, a bonus episode here on Reforming Men. Tell your friends that we're sending out some good material. If they will support us, we will be happy to share these episodes, these bonus episodes as well. Nate, you want to sign us off, brother?
Brothers, thank you so much for being supporters of our show. And we do have an upcoming opportunity for you to support us even more, and which will be giving away some limited edition Reforming Men swag. And be on the lookout on Twitter and Facebook for that announcement. And again, thank you so much for your support at this time. God bless you guys.